Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Trans Day of Remembrance panel brought to you by the Durham Libraries and PFLAG Durham. I am so pleased that everyone could join us and our speakers for this important conversation. I'm Julia Campbell, Adult Services Librarian at the Ajax Public Library. We bring you this program to recognize the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is an annual observance on November the 20th that honors the memory of the transgender people whose lives were lost in acts of anti-transgender violence. We would like to begin this program by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. The land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. And now just a couple of housekeeping items. If you experience any technical difficulties this evening, we recommend that you exit the program and re-enter. If you continue to have difficulties, please place a comment in the chat and a staff member will assist you. Tonight's program is being recorded and live streamed to Facebook and will be posted also to YouTube for follow-up viewing. So our format for this evening will include a presentation from each of our speakers, followed by a Q&A portion with our panelists. I encourage you to enter any questions you have in the Q&A feature, and they will be addressed in the second half of the program. So our host for this evening is Jake Farr, a social worker and counselor dedicated to supporting trans and gender expansive individuals. He works to bring conversation to gaps and inequities in transgender care to the Durham region. He's involved in leading community support groups, providing educational supports, participating in community of practice teams, and developing safer housing for trans individuals, and building a network of service providers to encourage sharing resources to help reduce gaps in service for the 2S LGBTQI community. Currently, he is the president of PFLAG Durham Region, and Jake identifies as a trans person. We are very fortunate to have him with us this evening, so without further ado, I will turn it over to Jake to say a few words and to introduce our speakers. Welcome, Jake.
Great. Thank you very much for having me tonight, and thank you very much for including PFLAG in this important work. I also, in regards to land acknowledgement, I also want to make sure that we shine light on the fact that various genders and sexualities were an integral part of many Indigenous nations prior to colonization. That queer, trans, and two-spirit Indigenous people still exist today, despite colonizers' attempts to erase them. It's important to remember and know that Europeans introduced homophobia and transphobia to this land, and that is the reason why PFLAG continues to do its work and to supply resources and education and advocate for the 2S LGBTQI community today, and will continue to do so. So welcome everyone. I want to personally, through PFLAG Durham, thank again Ajax Library for hosting this, plus all the Durham libraries, who this is actually our second event of the week to celebrate trans identities. We had the activation on Monday where we changed a book cover of a trans person who was basically bullied into having a name that's not how they wanted the book to be. So we did that work. And tonight we're coming forward. We're going to be having some panelists from the community right here in Durham that are going to speak on behalf for themselves with their lenses on their journey so far. And then we're going to get into some other topics further down. So without further space and me taking it up, what we want to do tonight is show that although we are going to end this week on a solemn note around people who have lost their lives, that right now tonight we want to celebrate identities. We want to change that narrative and show that trans identities are something to be rejoiced, not rejected. And so tonight I'm going to introduce, we have parents of a trans child, Al and Kathy. We also have Riley and Zachary, who are both folks who have taken the vulnerable and come on here tonight to be able to talk about their journey as a trans person. And so I'm going to offer up Riley at this point in time to be able to come and speak about Riley's current journey. Everyone's journey is different. And so I'm offering Riley to come forward and talk to us about tell us about your experience, right? Tell us about what it's like to be a trans person in Durham, and give us a little insight, and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you, Jake. Well, before I start off, pardon my voice. It is the, 4 months on testosterone trans guy voice I got going for me right now. But anyway, my name is Riley. My pronouns are he, him, and I identify as a trans male. I'm from Ajax. And I just would like to say thank you for inviting me to do this panel today. I'm very excited and I would love to share my experience. So I always kind of knew, I guess, there was something a little bit different about me. I mean, a lot of people say that. However, for me, when I was younger, I never really understood gender, especially like gender roles. And I was always more of a tomboy and I liked, hanging out with all the boys and dressing masculine and just very masculine oriented. And for me, I didn't really understand like the difference between girl and boy besides like, your like genitals and stuff like that. So as I grew up, for me, I was, hyper feminizing myself because I wanted to fit in with my peers and all the other girls around me who, I'd hang out with. And a lot of that caused like a lot of negative emotions in me, in which did not help along my journey. It was pretty hard sometimes, but eventually about 2 3 years ago I kind of came to the realization that I'm trans. Like this is who I am. And at first it was really hard for me to accept that because I did not want to be trans. I knew how hard it was for the trans community to just exist in general, like let alone transition and go through all that and all the coming out processes. So for me, I was very nervous and I once again, hyper feminized myself trying to repress all that. And eventually it was just making me miserable. So I knew I had to do something about it. So I eventually started coming out to friends because a lot of my friends were, queer, supportive and all that. So I told my friends. They were totally okay with that at school, but I still kept it a secret from like family and like teachers and all that. So about March 2020, I finally came out to my family, and my family very accepting, and I'm very grateful for that because I know a lot of queer people and trans youth do not have the same experience I do. So I'm very grateful for my parents being as supportive as they possibly can be. So I came out to my parents, and it all went pretty well. There was a lot of tears. It was, a big change for everyone, but I guess a lot of them kind of figured, there's something a little different about me. So after I came out to my parents, I did coming out to school and changing all that stuff. And, I wanted to medically transition and all that. So I would have to talk to family and doctors and Jake about how that's going to look for me. But really growing up, I guess, as a teenager who's trans in Durham, it's been really amazing, but also very hard. Um, I'm privileged enough to, be a white passing male. So I'm able to, have that privilege. But at the same time, I do experience lots of transphobia, like quite regularly, especially in school. Um, Growing up, I guess it's really nice because I'm able to see a world in a like different eyes than your cis-normative people. And I just find it really amazing how many people I've met, especially through my identity. And I mean, I don't use it as just something to like, I guess, as a conversation starter, and it's the only thing that I am, but it's part of me and I've embraced that now. And I use it to help, communicate with others and empathize and sympathize with those who struggle. So it's been really nice, especially in Durham, meeting other queer people, other trans youth alike to me that I'm able to relate to and form really nice bonds and connections with. However, there is some, in case of transphobia I do experience, which, that's never not a good thing. No one likes discrimination, whether it's, for your um, gender, sexual orientation, race, etc. But for me, it's still very prominent in Durham. And as much as we want to, end it and stop all that. It's a long process, which I'm glad PFLAG and other communities and just resources are trying to prevent any further homophobia, transphobia, etc. So, I mean, for me, I feel very grateful just to live in this day and age where I can express myself, and it's a lot easier for me to be who I truly am compared to, how it was a few decades ago, that it was not as easy as it is today. However, I do face a lot of struggles still, which are frustrating, but I know I'm learning and, I guess maneuvering my way around those and just help making all those incidents just turn into a stronger person. Because for me, I know coming to terms with being trans was really hard, as I've mentioned before, and it took me a long, long time, I guess, for me to process that fully and just kind of really accept that. Like, even now, I still struggle with that, but I'm starting to embrace my identity and like accept that it's fully a part of me and I cannot change that. So, yeah, well, that is pretty much my story. So, thank you very much for inviting me, Jake.
Well, no, that's beautiful. So I do want to ask you a question just around there. We'll move on, but I do want to kind of give you that space to be like, you mentioned that, um, it's been difficult for you, to put your identity together, right? You thought about it a long time and now you're embracing it.
Yes.
So kind of what does that, if you could just kind of explain to folks that maybe, because remember, folks, gender, we all know this, gender's a bit hard to explain, but for you to, when you say it's been hard to put it together and kind of like, and now you're claiming it, you know, what does that mean maybe to somebody who is that has never thought about their gender other than the one that they think that they are, right?
I mean, for me, it was constantly struggling back and forth, like just saying, oh, maybe I'm a masculine girl, or like, transgender exists. That's a thing. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's not. Like, that can't be me. That's only like, that's not me. That like doesn't, that's something other people deal with, not in my life. That's just, that'd be weird. That'd make me, different from everyone. And I'm just a regular person. So it was a lot of just kind of going back and forth, like trying to figure out like why I was feeling all this self-hatred towards myself. And a lot of it was disguised as just, like instead of more gender oriented, I thought it was a lot around just how I looked in general. It was often disguised as that because, growing up as a teenager, everyone's insecure and struggling with their identity in general and just their how they look. So I thought it was just a lot of like insecurities and all stuff like that. However, I started kind of taking a deeper look into things and reflecting on myself a lot more and realizing, oh, okay, this is not just insecurities about, whether I look like this or look like the models. It's something different and deeper than that. So for me, it was a lot of just self-reflection and exploring.
Okay, cool. Gonna ask you like the fun question right now. We'll come back to some. So, in your opinion, what has been the silliest question that you've been asked so far in your journey?
Okay, so this wasn't directly at me actually. So my mom's a teacher, right? And she's told her students about me being trans and they're kids, they're in grade 2. So they're like, "Ooh, cool. They like to ask questions, okay?" So she has gotten a few strange questions, but I mean, usually she's like, "No genital questions. That's off limits. You don't ask trans people that. They understand." But today she was asked by one of her students like it's weird because this is a grade 2 asking this. Like this little girl raises her hand and goes, "So, like, I don't want to ask about like genitals or anything, but like does how does Riley swim? Like what does he wear in like swimming?" So my mom had to explain, like, "Oh, well, what do boys usually wear? Stereotypically, what do they usually wear?" And so the girl's like, "Oh, of course, like swim trunks, whatever." But then she's like, "I don't want to be mean, but like what does he do about the top half?" So I'm laughing to
And
myself
this is
while she's
great
telling me
too.
about this. Yeah, this is a grade 2 talking to me, like talking to my mom about this. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So she explains kind of what like the rundown of a binder is, and so that was a
That's
fun, I
great.
guess, little experience, which I know it wasn't directly with me, but I thought that was really cute. So yeah.
Well, I think you know what I think what you just said though. I think for folks who are maybe listening or listen later, that oftentimes we think that the youth don't know what's going on. We don't think that young people can understand gender or that they can't understand things. And here is a 6, 7 year old, maybe whatever 7 year old asking questions very thoroughly and
Yeah.
and asking about, and they're very curious, right? So I think that's very interesting. On one side, it is about the body parts because that's what they have in their head. So that teaches us that society is still, pushing that gender is about your body parts rather than about your soul. But the other part is that I think that also, folks, for everybody in here, it kind of just shows that youth really can have a grasp. And once you explain stuff, people go, "Oh, okay, good, thanks." Right. So I think that's a really positive sort of space. That it's not something that we have to hide and we have to hide behind. So I appreciate that. We'll be coming back to you too, because we'll have lots of questions, but thank you for sharing that. So up next, I'm going to invite Zachary to be able to come and share what you would like to share, Zachary, about, kind of like how you've, come to figure out who you are and the process or whatever you would like to share with us tonight. And yeah, then you can be ready for my, invasive questions after.
Hi. You guys can hear me, right? Yes? No? Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, okay. Okay. Hi, I'm Zach. I go by they, he pronouns. I let's start off with like younger me. I always would steal. This is in my memory. I don't know. Never mind. I used to steal my cousin's Toronto Maple Leafs jacket, and he's a boy, and so I was like, oh yeah, like in kindergarten, for some reason I would always steal it, and I'd always want to wear it, and everyone would always be like, you can't wear that, you're a girl, and I'm like, but I just want to wear the man jacket. That's one memory I wanted to share, but um, I kind of always knew it was quite obvious. I'm just when I used to look back at it after sort of coming out as trans to a few people, I always used to think like, am I trans? Like there's no signs of it in my childhood. Like, am I really trans? But then when I would look back, there's so many different things. Like I even had a TikTok. Well, it was called Musically at the point, but I had a Musically account and I made this video. I was wearing a Green Lantern t-shirt and wearing a bow tie. And I said, or like a little bow headband thing, not a bow tie. And it was some weird audio where it's like, this is me. And I pointed at the Green Lantern thing and not the bow, trying to say like I'm more of a boy than a girl. If that wasn't a clear sign that I was trans, then I don't know what else could have been even more clear. Um, what else is there? I actually, um, in grade 7, I started actually fully questioning my identity. That's when I was friends with a person and I came out to them saying like, I think I want to go by they them pronouns instead of she her pronouns. And they had the audacity to say, no, you're not. That's not real. That's not a thing. I was like, excuse me? So that made me suppress it, like the emotion, the feeling so much. I would over feminize myself, and as a child, for some reason, I would over sexualize myself in a way. Um just to fit in, just to make myself feel like I'm a girl. And looking back on it, I wouldn't say I regret it. It kind of, in a way, builds to my story and it builds to me being a stronger person and a better person. Um, but it's definitely not something I want anyone else to experience, especially as a child. Um, sorry. um,
It's okay.
in grade 8 though, no, not in grade 8. Yeah, no, it wasn't grade 8 because that's when COVID started. Um, like we had our quarantine shut down, and that's when everything just I couldn't suppress it anymore. I couldn't hold it back. Everything was just coming at me. Um, and I finally like for some reason, being trans was a trendy thing at one point last year. Um, and it kind of made me think like, well, if I were to come out, would people think I'm doing it because of the trend? Like, am I too late to come out? I used to be really scared because like it was made a trend, and I didn't want anyone in my family to think, oh, she's just doing it because it's a trend. So but then I actually finally gained the courage to sort of come out to my family. It was a weird way. There was never really a full coming out story. It was me posting a video on Facebook so then everyone in my family can see it all at once, because I didn't want to come out to each person individually. I was too scared to confront anyone. Um, Bad decision, but it's okay. Everyone knows now. Uh, and the first thing that happens was my dad calls me, and he was really confused about it. He didn't understand it. I wouldn't say he was being transphobic, but since he didn't understand it, I felt really hurt because like it wasn't taught to him, nor was it even taught to my mom really. So when everyone would always ask me these questions and they wouldn't really ask it the right way either, it would feel really attacking questions sort of way. It made me feel really like insecure and really bad about myself. So I used to doubt myself all the time. Once I came out as Zach and set up my school name to Zach, every time I'd see it, it felt wrong. It felt like gross in a way. But I guess now that my dad and my mom have both come around and finally call me Zach, my dad calls me Zach Attack, using the right pronouns and trying their best to and to support me, I feel a lot more comfortable with my name and more comfortable with who I am. And I'm not scared to be myself. I openly admit that I am trans, and anyone who's transphobic to me, which happens quite a bit, I just ignore as to the best I can, because, you know, why would I need to listen to that, you know? So that's basically my story. I came out, not everyone was supportive right away, but everyone's working their way there. Um, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I can see that's very emotional, and so I wanted to take that moment, even to share that with who's ever on here. Is that just the vulnerability for the folks that are here tonight, telling about their story? Because remember, like, this is recorded, and they're here, and transphobia does exist here in Durham. We know it does. Um, I think it's a space that's getting better. I think we can't not acknowledge that it doesn't exist, but we can hope that it does get better, and there is more protections in place. So I'm just wondering for you, Zachary, I know like you're saying like your family's taken time. Um, what was it like for you? Like, so at school, like, right? Did you have you approached school about like how changing your name on the record? Like, as you don't have to do it legally, but have you approached your school yet about changing your name in class and things like that?
Yeah. In second quad of grade 9, so last year, because I'm in grade 10, um, I actually kind of chose my name. My ex now was like, "Hey, you," because that's when I got my lip piercings. He was like, "You kind of look like a Zach," and I'm like, "Zach." It really clicked with me, so I stuck with that. And then I asked my grandpa one day because I was with my Indigenous arts teacher, Miss Prohaska. She was talking to me about it, and she said, "Did you ever really think of changing your name?" I said, "But don't you need a parent approval?" And she said, "As long as you can get at least one guardian, it doesn't have to be both, but at least one of them to accept and write it out for you, then yes." And so I was like, okay, how am I going to go about this? I didn't know how my mom felt about trans people at the time. Um, and I also didn't really understand, or I didn't really think my papa would be supporting at the time either. So like, I was like, what do I do? I asked my papa to do it for me because I was living with him. And he asked me, I'm sorry if you can hear my sister. He asked me, uh, why do you want to be called Zach? And I said, well, it's a nickname. I didn't want to come out to him yet because I was too scared, but I told him like, oh, it's just a nickname. And he would ask me questions like, but I'm
Family.
sorry.
It's
Um,
okay.
he asked questions like, wouldn't that affect your diploma? Wouldn't that like do this? And I said, well, I don't think it would affect my diploma. And he asked like, why can't you just ask people to do that? And I said, well, I don't want people to know what my I didn't say dead name, I said real name, I think. Um, I didn't want people to know what my dead name was. He said, okay. So he did that for me. And so my name has been registered as Zach since grade 9 now. And
Great.
there's quite a lot of people from elementary school that still know me as my dead name. Sorry. Um, so I'm sorry, give me.
No problem. Take a break. This is what Zoom is like, folks, is that if it's not the dogs or the cats, it's like your little baby sister or brother, somebody doing something in the background or, whatever. So, well, Zach's taking a little break there. It's kind of like, you remember the old days when they used to like, take a break with the lines in the TV or whatever? We should have some like, music. Where's the music we could play, right? So one thing I do want to talk about, and when Zachary comes back, we're going to talk about this. You've heard them say, dead name in the way that they talk. And I think it's something that some folks may take as a negative. And it's just a space where I would love to hear, from Zachary's point of view. Maybe while Zachary's taking care of that, maybe Riley, you could speak to, people use the thing of like dead name. Some people use birth name. And so maybe could you talk about what that kind of maybe even means to you? Um, Whether what you use and why do we sometimes in the community change that to either be dead name or birth name?
All right. So um, I usually use dead name around other trans people and more accepting people. Birth name, I usually stick to that around cis people or, I mean, just older folks in general, just for it's more easy for them to understand. But dead name usually means just, I guess, a trans person's old name that they were assigned at birth. Um, that's that's pretty much it. It's pretty basic, but to me, I know for a lot of trans people, it can be a positive thing and they don't mind it. But for me personally, it does hold negative connotations for me. It's been used against me in my time on this planet, so
Mhm.
it's not really, I guess, my favorite word to hear. But it's just for me, it's more of a negative thing, honestly, because I don't want to forget my past. In no way I'm trying to erase who I once was, quotations there. I'm
Mhm.
still the same person, but erase that past. It makes me personally uncomfortable because that's someone that's just not me who they're referencing. That's not who I am. And it can be a safety issue sometimes when people
Yeah.
bring it up. I don't really want people knowing it or saying it because it just hearing it makes me uncomfortable because it's been used in such a negative way in the past for me. But I know for everyone it's very different, and you know they don't mind if some people just use it or just say it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know that in the community, there are quite a lot of trans people who do take offense to people saying their dead name or referring to them in the past with their dead name.
Sure. Yeah, no, for sure. So thank you very much. So just, for anybody that doesn't aware that, and there's a thing out there where there's a preferred name versus a chosen name. And in all honesty, it really like preferred is kind of like, well, I would prefer, like mashed potatoes over baked potato. That's like a preference, right? This is, when you're choosing your name, there's often a lot of thought that goes into choosing your name. There's a lot of like, sometimes we talk to our families, our families help us find that name. So, there's even vocabulary out there that like chosen name is a much more honoring thing. It's because I chose it, right? I just didn't decide like one day, like, oh, I did this, right? So just when we're talking through, when we go into that, like, and it's, I think actually Al and Kathy, as I bring them up too, it'll be interesting because some folks change their name a bunch of times. You might start out and be like, okay, like I'm going to be so and so, and then, oh, that doesn't really fit. And there's a journey through that. So, if you can remember back to the people who birthed you, right? Or, in a case of an adoption, that they probably thought about your name for a very long period of time. So it goes to say that when you're re-choosing the name that's going to reflect your being, it might take some time and some switching, right? And you have that thing. So sometimes we hear a little backlash about that in the trans community where it's like, just pick a name, and it's like, so, giving some space and some light to that. So I think right now, we can move on to Al and Kathy, because I think Zachary's still taking care of some family business. And so we'll let him do his thing. And so now I would love to invite forward. So, tonight is a fabulous night in order to honor and to bring forth really the beauty and the strength of the trans community here in Durham. And believe me, there are a lot of us, so we walk among you, even if you don't know it. But the thing is that, there's also the people who stand behind us. Sometimes not everybody does, but tonight I asked for one of the parents here in the Durham area to come forward and to be able to talk about their journey as a parent of a trans child. And I know Al and Kathy through some work that we've done together in the community. And I also see, just so you know, Al and Kathy, I think there's some people in the things that know you from the groups that we've been in. So just letting you know, you need to be like mindful of what you're saying, because they're out there watching you. And so it is. So welcome, Al and Kathy, and I'll give you that space now to tell us how it is from the parent side.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that we spoke to our son first before agreeing to appear on this panel, because as Jake said, if we're out, he's out. So I spoke to Lewis first and said, hey, Jake asked us to do this. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, sure, cool, go ahead. So Al will jump in at any time, but I will talk and talk and talk if he doesn't jump in. Our son first came out to us when he was 13 years old. He wrote us a letter and he said, Mom, Dad, I have something I want to tell you, but I can't tell you, so read the letter. And he explained very thoroughly how he felt that he'd been born in the wrong body. He felt more like a male than a female. And one of the things that stuck with me from the letter is that he said, if you guys think that you have to kick me out now, I'll understand that. And I broke down in tears at that point. And we went up to his room and hugged him and said, what on earth made you ever think we would kick you out of the house? We're your parents. You're our child. I don't care if you're male, female, a hippopotamus, or a giraffe. You're our kid. And that's all that matters. We love you. And there's nothing that you could do to make us stop loving you, no matter how hard you try. And he has tried before he came out and after, but it has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with personality. So when he first came out to us, we made an appointment with our family doctor to talk about next steps. And we put him on Lupron immediately to stop puberty, to stop periods and breast development. And he was referred to the Sick Kids Transgender Clinic, which is a fabulous clinic. They're multidiscipline. They have nurses, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, social workers, endocrinologists, everything. And he was seen by sick kids for a number of years. They monitored his Lupron. When he turned 17, he decided he wanted to go on testosterone. So he did, and it was really cool to see the transformation, to see the peach fuzz growing and the voice lowering, as Riley had talked about, because the voice starts cracking like a 13-year-old boy's voice would, but he was 16 or 17 at the time. When he came out as trans, it really wasn't a huge surprise to anybody. Lewis always went for the boy toys, the trucks, the cars, the little people farms. He preferred to play with boys. He liked to play Foursquare at recess.
Dressed like a boy for the
like
longest time. We said, oh, tomboy,
And he did dress in dresses for special occasions, and sometimes he liked to dress up, and that was fine. The one thing I would say as a parent, when he came out to us, was I asked a lot of questions. I said to him, I don't know a lot about trans people. Talk to me about it. Show me the videos that you're looking at. Somebody recommended a show called Just Jazz that follows trans male from basically childhood on up through her teenagehood. And we would sit and watch lots of episodes of that. The pronouns and the name were difficult. He chose a placeholder nickname because he didn't know what he wanted his chosen name to be. So he went with Red because he had red hair and it was kind of a nickname. Changing the pronouns from she, her to he, him. I had a difficult time with it at first, not because I had a problem with it, but because it was just automatic. She, or calling him by his birth name. And at some points he'd get really upset with me, thinking that, you know, I wasn't honoring who he was. And I'd just say to him, it took me 13, I've been calling you she, her for 13 years. By the time you're 26, I will have this down pat. But it hasn't been that difficult. He then, about 2 years ago, decided that he wanted to be called Aloysius, or Lewis for short. We have changed his name at all of our doctor's offices, with our pharmacy, everywhere. If anyone calls him by his birth name, I'm very quick to stand up and say, no, I'm sorry, that's not who's here. This is Lewis or Aloysius. Please make sure to use that name. He has a very difficult time because we haven't done the official name change yet, when he has to hand out his health card, because he feels very self-conscious about his dead name, as it were.
One thing I have found that we've had to do is there are times when we have to use what is the dead legal name. And I found that it makes me feel better, which sounds kind of funny, to apologize that I have to use that name. And he's very much with like, yeah, I understand. We just haven't got the name changed yet, so it's okay. But I understand from talking to some of his friends that that's like, absolutely, you can't say that. You can't use a dead name. But the process of getting a name change has been a bit of a challenge, especially with COVID holding everything up for a ridiculously long time.
But I think the most important thing I could tell any parent is you love your child. Keep loving them. Accept them. They're not changing their genders because it's trendy. This is a difficult thing for anybody to go through, let alone a teenager. And if they're coming out to you and saying that they feel that they're in the wrong body or they're the wrong gender, they're doing that because they're questioning at the very least. And you have to listen. You've got to listen, and you've got to love, and you've got to support. I know that I sometimes get referred to as Mama Bear because I've always advocated for my kids. Both of my children have some special needs, and I've always been an advocate, but they're learning self-advocacy. Lewis was bullied by a boy in his grade 11 math class who said, "You don't have all the right parts. I'm not going to refer to you as a boy." And Lewis turned around and looked at him and said, "You're trampling on my human rights. And if you do that, I'll take you before the Human Rights Board." When he came home and told me that, I did a little happy dance. And apparently the next day he went to school and he had the part of the Human Rights Bill that applies to transgender people. And he had highlighted that part and he handed it to the boy and said, "Read this and learn something." But I did a lot of reading. I got a lot of books. One of them is called Beyond Magenta, that has a story of 6 or 8 transgender youth. So I read those and I found it very eye-opening. Counseling is important, not just for the child, but for the family. One thing that he was concerned about was coming out as transgender to his grandparents because they were in their 70s at the time. But he gave us permission to talk to them about it. And they just looked at us and went, "Yeah, like that makes sense. He's always wanted to do boy things. So I don't know why we didn't see it before."
And just before you get too far on, one of the things is like you talk about coming out to family and friends and teachers. He initially was unsure, and then he was more of a questioning. then kind of proceeded to what non-binary. It's like he was learning at the same time, wasn't exactly sure where he fit. And so we're like, okay, are we supposed to help? And the advice we were given was no, let him figure out where he belongs and then accept him for where he belongs. And then he got to the point where it's like, yeah, I'm a trans male and that's where I am and that's how I want to be known. And I think you can't push them. You can't say, quick, make a decision. It's not simple. It must have taken about a year for him to move to know who he was. So I think it's important that parents understand it's not necessarily quick and easy to say, yeah, I'm coming out, this is who I am, and it's never going to change. It changes.
And one thing I wrote down in my notes was being transgender is not a choice or a decision, but sharing that one is transgender is, and you should follow your child's lead. I've got to say to both Riley and Zachary, hearing your stories, my heart was going out to you because it's not an easy thing. I haven't had to live it, but I've had to live with it and observe. And there are times, so many times, when I just want to jump right in and defend my son. And I stop because he has to defend himself. But recently he went to vote for the first time, and we went together as a family because my husband was off work that day. And we walked into the polling station, and my husband and Al and Lewis went ahead of us, and they were standing in line. And the woman that was directing things looked at our elections cards and then said, okay, you two go stand behind those gentlemen over there when they move forward. So I tiptoed over to Lewis and I whispered in his ear, that lady just called you a gentleman. And the smile on his face was absolutely amazing. But I look at pictures of him now and I don't see him as anything other than my son. I don't see the daughter that used to be there. When we talk about when Lewis was a child, it's always when Lewis was a child. We do not use the dead name because this is a choice he's made and we have to honor his choice. And I also find that being open about talking about having a transgender child does generate a lot of conversations. It's amazing the number of people that say to me, my friend or my cousin or somebody I know has a child that's struggling and doesn't know what to do. And I'm just saying, love your kid, listen to your kid. If you have any questions, give me a call. And I just wrote down a couple of little notes, but pronouns, very important, but you may struggle. But I have to say that I admire the bravery of all the transgender people I know for coming out, for being honest, for standing up for themselves. At Lewis's 17th birthday party, he attends, I should say this, he attends a program through CARIA for trans youth called Colors. And he's been going to that, I think, since he, yes, quite a few years. He's made a lot of great friends. We had them over for his birthday. And it was great because for a while I thought all his friends were imaginary. So it was great to meet them in person. And they were all very open. I said to them all at the beginning, I said, I know you've all got different pronouns and I'm probably going to screw it up. Forgive me, correct me. Know that it's not coming from a place other than confusion and not knowing. So help me out there. And they were all really happy that we were so open to talk about it. I talked to one of his friends about being trans and being gay, because that's how Lewis identifies. And he said to me, gender, being transgender is about your sexual identity. Your sexual orientation is a total other thing. And it was like, oh, okay. He's like, being gay doesn't have anything to do with your body parts. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. You are who you are and you love who you love. The biggest thing that has ticked me off so far is bathrooms, which is, I know, a big challenge for transgender people. Oshawa Town Center, whoa, they've got an all gender bathroom, but to access it, you have to call security and have them unlock the door. So I don't think that's very accessible at all. Bathrooms are a big thing. And I think the sooner that we get to either non-gender or all gender bathrooms, the better all will all be. Some people are really touchy on that, but I'm like, it's got to stall. You're not seeing anything. So get over it. Do you have anything?
And yeah, I'm just going to say about bathrooms, a lot of it is as your child progresses into who they are becoming, I guess is the best way to put it, they will take on more of the traits. And now these days, I mean, you look at Lewis and he's like one of the guys, he's got a David Bowie mullet and a
My son has a
scruffy
mullet.
beard and big hairy arms on him, and nobody looks at him twice anymore. But in the beginning, he wanted to go to the bathroom of his chosen gender, but he didn't look right. And it was quite difficult for a while for him.
I think the first time he used a restaurant bathroom, you had to go with him.
Yeah, I went with him to make sure there was no aggression towards him. But at the time, he wasn't on testosterone, and even though he had a very androgynous look, he was very afraid. Now he doesn't think twice about it because he is absolutely the man that he wants to be, and wouldn't think twice. Why would he go to the ladies? That's just totally wrong for him now.
But in high school, it was difficult because the quote all gender bathrooms were the disabled bathrooms. And he said there were two, one at one end of the school, one at the other end. And 90% of the time when he went to use one of them, the doors were locked. So because they were doing maintenance or cleaning them or something. So that is really difficult. And I think that's something that's really important to address. But again, the best advice I can give to a parent is listen to your child, ask questions. Don't ask transphobic questions, just ask questions to be educated. Read books, watch videos, learn everything you can, but love your child and accept their choice.
And I think one thing that was very important for Lewis was people would misgender him that he didn't feel he could correct. And it's very important for you to step in those moments. If it's someone that he saw as maybe not authority, but as an adult that he should be.
A waitress at a restaurant.
Yeah, and there are a number of times that I've stepped in and I said, no, this is my son, Lewis. And the people I'm talking to are a little taken aback, but he felt that it was so helpful that I was letting people know that this is Lewis, our son. Sorry, you've made a mistake. And that really helped him a lot. And now he's 19 now, so he's a little more confident, a little more sure of himself, and he has no problem correcting people at all. Doesn't matter who they are.
But it's a process.
But it is a process, and it does take a while.
Although one of the things, like Jake said, is it's like, okay, you've come out as trans. Thanks for sharing that. Don't forget to clean your room and take out the garbage. That doesn't change. So I guess that's about all that I can say, although I'm sure Jake has a couple of questions.
Beautiful. I as always, I always appreciate, and I do take space that, sometimes parents or the support people are forgotten their role, because although you can love your child, it is a switch, right? Our children are born to us, and we have a picture from the moment we either decide to have children, we are having children, we have them, we have this like trajectory. And when it shifts, it's like how you shift with it, right? But when we look at it, like maybe you had a trajectory for them to be, a social worker, and then they turned out to be a doctor, and it's like, oh, now I have to figure out how am I going to process that, right? So it's just a shift, right? It's like changing the framework, folks. And so when I look at parents like Alan and Kathy, and it's like, they did what they could do and all they knew. And what they did is they went for resources, and they joined a parent group that
Yes,
that,
I
they
didn't
get
mention that.
resources,
Sorry, Jake.
right?
That was very important.
That's fine. I'm just saying, like, I think it's good for folks to know. It's like, so you're not alone out there, right? So like, I think because oftentimes parents or caregivers feel very alone. And so, there's a space in there that in Durham now, folks, we have groups, we have spaces. PFLAG offers them, Caria offers them. There's lots of spaces now that we can access. So I wanted to say, don't feel alone. Let me ask you a question. So out of everything, how is it for you as a parent when you had to sit back and let Lewis handle a situation that you really wanted to handle for him, but you were like, I'm going to sit back on this one? I don't know if I kind of threw this one at you, but like, if you can remember anything where you're like, oh, Mama and Papa Bear want to come out, but we got to let Lewis do this, right? Did you ever have any of those moments?
Oh yeah. When that kid bullied him at school, but Lewis handled it perfectly. I wanted to go in and beat the crap out of the kid,
Great.
but
Okay.
he handled it, so I backed off.
Okay.
Bathrooms. I just say to him, can I help you? Or are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just stepping in, it's like, if you need my help, let me know.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm going to let you handle it.
Yeah.
But
Perfect. Yeah.
it's hard because I've been advocating for them since like grade 1 with the ADHD. So it
Right.
is really hard for Mama Bear to pull her claws back in and just settle down, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you. So you're leading me right into this, and so I think I'd love to open it up if we could, like, just to all the panelists, because I have a question that was actually through the question and answer, which kind of ties into some of the stuff you spoke to. I think everybody did. Is, how do we think that the school system here in Durham is handling trans individuals and people that transition within the school system, right? And I don't want to I'm not ditching like the school system, but like I think it's a system. It's not just DDSB or Cortha or wherever we're coming from tonight. I'm just wondering, like, how do we think that it's handling what could be done better, right? So I'd ask, if Zachary, if you're around too, you can pop your camera back on. I'd like to hear from each panelist, or group, like, what do you think that could be a little bit done a little bit better or could be looked at? Let's start, Alan, Kathy, you started because you already talked about one. I mean, you mentioned
I
that
would
in
say
the front and the back of the room.
I'd say individually, dealing with individuals at the school level has been very positive. I've had like a lot of good interactions when I'm talking to the school secretaries or to a specific teacher. I know they've got gay straight alliances in the school.
Okay.
Pickering High had a couple of drag shows before COVID, which apparently I could not go to because it was only for students and there was security. So we weren't allowed to attend, which really ticked me off. But I think the individuals are working hard. I think the institutional level needs to step up and work harder and stop giving lip service.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. And we may come back to that in a minute. So, Zachary, how about you, if you're ready? How do you think that the school system is doing? Like, how do you feel like the school system handles trans people and their transitions in school for you? How has it been?
For me personally, my experience has been okay. Most people are really supportive and they try their best. But what I have noticed with a lot of like my friends or just people I know in general, I'm in the what you guys would probably know as the GSA. We actually call it the QSU, Queer Straight Unite, instead of Gay Straight Alliance. I also heard experiences there about how it's just not a lot of people seem to really understand it because it's more open now, but it's not taught to the teachers properly. So since it's not taught to the teachers properly, the teachers don't really seem to understand it. So it seems like I have to teach the teachers about it, which I mean I'm okay with. Like I'm sure the teachers want to hear from the people that of the generation, I guess I could say. But at the same time, I feel like it should just be more like talked to amongst the teacher.
Yeah.
Sense.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense, right? So individuals make a difference, but I think that kind of goes along with what Kathy was saying. It's like, systemically, the teachers aren't getting the information. So it's great that you're willing to share, but maybe for some people, it might feel very overwhelming to constantly have to like tell people stuff. So Riley, how about you? How do you feel about the school system?
I agree with what Zachary said, of course, because I mean, for me, it's been fairly positive. There's only been a few, like, I guess, times where it wasn't, I guess, as good and, more supportive as I hoped it to be. But um, I think teachers just need that sort of education and need to be aware that, like, there are trans people in your school. A lot of teachers don't realize that and are so used to the cis normative world, and girls have long hair, boys have short hair, girls wear this, but it's so
Mhm.
old fashioned, yet we're just in 2021. It's just, I think they need to be educated on that being trans isn't like this rare thing. It's not like this 1 in 4 million people are trans. No, it's common. There are so many trans kids at my school, yet they aren't acknowledged because teachers don't ask. They don't ask for pronouns. They don't ask for, hey, do you have a preferred thing? It's just not taught to them. And I mean, the amount of times I've had to bring it up to them and say, hey, like, I have to out myself to you and say, hey, I'm trans. There's kids in this class that are gonna bully me. Like, just to let you
Right.
know, please have my back. It just gets kind of
Mhm.
frustrating,
Mhm.
especially when I'll tell them about my identity and how important it is to my mental health and just my safety. And even then they still continue to mess up. And
Mhm.
like, I know, like, of course you're gonna mess up, but sometimes it just gets to the point where it's very frustrating because I'm like, you're putting me in danger. You're putting me at risk for one, I mean, suffering mentally, and both, it could lead to, bullying and harassment, which I don't really want to experience. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of frustrating the lack of knowledge they have.
Okay, that's great. I mean, and I'll pass that along. I have another question from someone. So the question is, and then we'll go around again. What resources slash supports have been most helpful to you along your journey that you would like to share with others? So again, as parents, you can, or even if for Lewis, but so Kathy and Al, for you, what resources and supports have you found along your journey to be really helpful?
Hospital for Sick Kids Transgender Clinic, but do not make an appointment on the Friday of Pride weekend
No, you'll
because
never
you'll
get
never
there.
get there. It'll take longer to get from the highway to the hospital than it takes to get from Ajax to the highway.
Gotcha. Check.
Carrier Colors, Families in Transformation. And then just,
Well, things like the books you've been
yeah,
able to
Mhm.
I got a
find.
book
Okay.
on Beyond Magenta. I got a book that's more like a picture book almost on transphobia, what it
Great.
is, what it isn't.
Okay.
One of the things that I remember Lewis saying is, he said there was a girl in one of his classes that asked him very seriously why he wanted to be a boy, because she was raised in a very faith-related,
Faith-based.
faith-based, men are men, women are women. But she was asking for education, not because she was transphobic. And I think
Okay.
there's a difference of intent in the questions. If
Yeah,
you're
for
asking
sure.
the question with the intent of learning,
Mhm.
it's a lot different than being transphobic. And yes, teachers can make a huge difference. A supportive teacher is amazing and will back a student up 100%.
Perfect.
But
Yeah,
a
thank you
teacher
for
that
that.
is
Yeah.
not educated, especially, I have to say, older generations like my husband and myself, I know that schools are getting LGBTQ two-spirited counselors. One of them actually lives up the street from us that Lewis and I were talking to the other day. She was out walking her dog and we just got talking. We have the hate has no home here sign on our lawn. She saw it, she went and got one. And she introduced herself as an
Mhm.
LGBTQ coordinator at one of the local schools. So
Great.
that's important. But I totally agree with Riley that, pardon my French, but there are assholes everywhere. And you're going to
Believe-
run into them. And I know you don't want to be confrontational, but the best way to deal with a bully is by getting backup, by getting support, whether it's a teacher, a friend, a vice principal, but don't let them get away with it because
Okay.
that just propagates it. So you do what
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
to do to feel safe, but don't be afraid to stand up and say, hey, I'm here, I matter, pay attention to me and listen.
Okay, perfect. And so people know, Jen has been putting in links into the chat so you can catch some of those books, as well as some links to community supports. I just want to make sure everybody's there. And the groups that they're talking about, the Family Transformation Group is run out of Caria and with partnership with PFLAG, and it's it's like an 8-week group for parents or caregivers of youth.
Fabulous.
So Riley, what about you? What would you say? What resources and supports have been most helpful for you along the way so far?
I mean, of course, you, Jake, you have been a
Okay, stop.
major, but
Other people.
besides Jake, um, honestly, if you're not really into reading books or, I guess scrolling through web pages, I've honestly found a lot of trans or queer YouTubers. I guess, if you just want to watch something, there's quite a few, like one of the guys I often would follow up before, I was obsessed with like watching all of his like testosterone updates and all that, and just his name's Sam Collins, and he's super supportive of just, he's a trans guy himself, so he educates, but he also just makes fun content for, to just, I guess, teenagers to watch in general. But I mean,
Yeah. You can
there's
drop that in the chat if you want after. You can drop like the link in there so people
yeah,
can,
I'll drop a few links.
Yeah,
Just
for
there's quite a
sure.
few out there who just
Yeah.
honestly like
Very
kind of
positive.
help me realize like, oh, okay, yeah, this is okay. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So so even we're thinking like let's look into so what would you all say? So Zachary, if you're back around, what can we do, as a community and even as organizations that are be supporting, best support the trans community members, right? So thinking about Durham, maybe, and this is a space of like, what are the gaps that would be great to be filled here in Durham? And what else could we be doing as part of like the libraries as their advocacy work or PFLAG or CARIA? What could we be doing as community and organization to help and support the trans community? So Zach, have you got anything on that? Like what would you like to see to be supported?
It would be nice to see like just even small little details. Like personally, I don't care about like, oh, big groups, clubs, things, whatever. No, I like the small little details that people put. Like for example, my science teacher, she came to me and asked, "Hey, I want to show that like I'm supportive, but I don't know how." So if like even just everybody sort of like gets used to like putting little pride flags in windows, or like saying their pronouns first, like, hey, I'm Zach, my pronouns are they he, what are yours and what's your name, kind of thing. Just small things like that I
Okay.
really want to see more. And also, that wasn't really related to Durham, but
Well, overall it is.
I
I think
want to
I
see
think you're right. I think
honestly
you're
like
saying to do that as
more.
if we can, as we do that as a community, just be like when we come to a table, we come to here, we introduce ourselves. Everybody's introduced themselves with their name and their pronouns, so everybody knows. I think it is local, so you did good.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Anything else?
um I was gonna say something about like I didn't even know like this panel thing was like a thing that could probably happen in Durham until like you were like, hey, this is happening. I was like, that's a thing. I wish there was like, I want there to be more like representation of things like these. Like
Okay.
and I know it's kind of hard because like it's kind of hard to be like, oh, maybe social media, but like no one, if you're not famous, you don't get attention. But then like what about just I don't know really how to explain it. I just wish there was more like availability to people.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
more like I want to say representation, but that's not really the right word. More like, hey, this is happening, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So better communication to get to the community
Yeah.
so they know what things are
Yes.
happening. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. You know what? We're always looking for youth to tell us how do we get in touch with them, right? So, okay, Riley is back. We're going to go back around my screen. What about you? What could the community and or organizations do to best support the trans community, right? Like, so thinking like, what could we do better in Durham?
I mean, that's a pretty loaded question, but for me, honestly, um, I guess, I mean, of course, little things are very important, especially within schools for trans youth, because I do know there are quite a few trans people at my school and just around in general who they don't have access to that support because it's not out there. Like what Zach said, it's not communicated properly, and you have to go out of your way to find those things and find what's, new and updated, what's actually happening, especially because of COVID makes things a lot harder too. So
Yeah.
that does not help either. But I mean, communication is very, very a major, I guess, issue that we need to tackle as a community, because without it, even now, like I'm not aware of things in the community unless, like, you know, you're following certain Facebook pages, or, you know, you're checking websites, which, I mean, especially for youth, you're not really doing. Like, you're not really
Right.
going to check your email or checking websites. It's more, I think it'd be a lot more like better, especially for youth, if it was more prominent in schools, because that's where we spend most of
Okay.
our time.
That's
And
awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
it was more just kind of, I guess, like, brought to awareness, like, hey, like, you always see like girl empowerment things going on at school, but you never see like, oh, PFLAG's like hosting a trans awareness panel. Like, you never see things like that. And of course, I mean, there's probably all that, like, you know, behind the
Mhm.
scenes stuff you have to, you know, get all signed and whatever, but just, I
Okay.
guess, awareness would be a
Yeah.
major
Mhm.
yeah thing.
No, I think that's a great thing. I think you're right. I mean, like, you know, thinking old school, like websites and Facebook. I mean, let's be honest, that's for, you know, old people. And so you're right. Like, how do we get to the youth, right? And so schools is a great way. You live there for 8 months of the year, 10 months of the year. You know, so I think that's an awesome thing that we can bring forward. Alan, Kathy, so thinking about, you know, for you too, like, what do you think that the community and organizations within the community can do better to support the trans community members?
Well, I agree with what both previous speakers said, that the only reason I knew about the panel, besides you contacting us, was from the Families and Transformation website. I get updates from the library. I don't always read them, but there wasn't anything special, like a special email about this is Trans Week of Remembrance and this is what we're doing. I haven't been to the library since probably before COVID, but I know that I went to the main library in Ajax to find information on transgenderness, transgender people, how to handle it, transphobia. And at that time, it was a very small section. I think there were maybe 4 books, and only one of them that I really related to, which was, it was a lovely book of letters that transgender people had written to their parents or to important people in their lives. But there wasn't as much information as I would expect there to be. And still, there's not as much. I know that PFLAG does a lot and Carria does a lot to get it out there, but we need to get it through, I don't want to say normal chains or cis chains, but
Through
general.
regular.
It's not a special group. It's everybody, because everybody wants to know. Everybody needs to learn.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you. So I just saw Jen dropped in the website for family transformation. That is one. The other one really is it's run through Carria, and it's a group through them. It's called Family Transformations, and they actually have a Facebook page that parents can go to. So we can do that. Now I have one on here. I saw there's please ask any questions. I won't put names on it, but somebody did drop one in here, and they had a question about an adult child finding some space. And you know, is there space for in Durham region for people in their early 20s? And so yeah, there is spaces for that. It is, I think that's a gap. I think that's actually answering some of the question around what can the community do better. I think it's about expanding services to people that like are a little bit older. If I would ask for, I have a couple of folks from PFLAG. If one of you could go ahead and maybe like drop in the things around like the youth group and the sharing nights. And just so you know, I don't know if anybody from Carrie is on here, but we have they have gender journeys. So for the person who's asking a question for early 20s, great group for them to join through Carria. And it's a 8-week, and generally they meet community and they talk about all things trans and that kind of thing. So I would recommend that for folks. I don't know, Riley and Zach aren't that old, and Lewis isn't in his 20s yet.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, we don't, but if you do that, you can connect with PFLAG Durham Region, and then we can help you find resources as well. So answer that. So just asking any other questions out there, because right now those are the questions that came up. Is there any other questions that we can get answered for anybody? Oh, I have a hand up with Emily.
Hello, yes. I guess question I have is what is like one piece of advice that you would give, I guess, yourself 5 years prior, whatever, whenever you started your transition? What's some advice that you wish you could give your younger self? Or with the parents as well, you can give yourself advice that you'd like to give yourself as parents for your child.
Great. All right. Zach, you want to go first? What advice would you give yourself?
What advice?
If
Don't
any.
come out on Facebook.
Don't come out on what?
On Facebook. I
Okay.
wish I could have had the experience of fully talking to family and coming out instead of, hey, post it on Facebook. Because even when I came out as pan, it wasn't even like a full like sit down talk or even just like, hey mom, no. It was literally my mom one day was like, are you gay? And I was like, I'm pan. And she's like, okay, what does that mean? And then trans, how my mom found out was from, she got a call because I missed my class and it said Zach instead of my dead name. And she like called me like mad. She's like, why did you tell me? I was like, because I was scared. So I would definitely tell myself to not have my coming out thing on Facebook.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. I love that. Right. So yeah, taking it a different way. Well, we all do what we do, and we know what we know. How about you, Riley? What would you give yourself as I don't know, advice that maybe you would do differently, or maybe you would give someone who was starting out and was saying to you like, I don't know what to do.
I mean, honestly, this could apply for really anyone, especially me. As Jake may know, I'm not a very patient person, especially when it came to my medical transitioning, which is still ongoing. So, honestly, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna suck. Like it is gonna suck waiting. Like there's no way to get around just that negative side. It's not gonna be a great experience for everyone. However, just you really do have to keep looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, even though I've been told that 50 billion times. I can't even, oh my gosh, the amount of times I've been told that. It's ridiculous. But you honestly just have to like believe that because things do get better and it sucks. It really is gonna hurt for a while and just not be great, but it's gonna be okay.
Okay. So you would tell another person or your or your earlier self patience,
Yes.
and it will happen. Okay. All right. You can still tell yourself that. All right. Al and Kathy, like what would you like as parents, what would you maybe looking back on maybe something you've done or space if there's anything in there, or maybe the advice of what you would give to a new parent who would come to you and be like, ah, my kid is trans and I don't know what to do.
My kid is trans. What does that mean?
I think Kathy touched on it earlier and said you've got to support them. It's the same person. They just want to be seen different. There's nothing wrong with that. And as transition moves along, you learn so much about this new person that you really didn't think you would ever see from your child. And it's a journey for parents as well, and they need to understand it's got its trials and tribulations, but it's actually been enjoyable in a way. I mean, I know that sounds funny, but we're seeing somebody blossom into who they want to be, who they feel they are, what is right. And now, I mean, we have a son he's going to college, he's enjoying himself, he's excited. And, just by being supportive and helping them with their journey, it's really helped us and him. And it's just something that I would say to parents who are very, ooh, I don't like this, it's against this, it's against that, it's religious. No, it doesn't matter. they're still your child. You still need to support them. They're going to change with or without you. They're moving to this new person. Enjoy it, because it's like having, in a way, it's like having a new child.
I did say when he first came out to us, I looked at him and I said, great, your father now has the son he's always wanted, which he's never said. You know, he made it kind of like lighthearted. And I know with his friends, I've said to them when they've been here, I've said, anytime you want to just come and hang out and be who you are, you're welcome here. Because even though their parents may know whether they're trans or gay, there's still some lines they feel they can't cross with their parents.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you just want to hang out somewhere and be who you are in a safe space, you're welcome here.
Beautiful. That's really lovely. So you know, we're coming up closer to the end of time, and I'm going to allow all the panelists to have one last round of something to say, but I do want to just point out some things I wanted to make sure that we get out into the public. One is our libraries are a huge supportive system for the Pride community, as I call it, because just to be really inclusive. They really always have had space. History around libraries they've been a very large part of the social work network. They have people. Everybody's welcome at the library, right? Our homeless, our unhoused, our precariously housed, low income, high income, doesn't matter who you are welcome at the library. So I do want to point that out. I have been to the libraries. I have had youth go to the libraries, and they're always spoken about here in Durham as really safe and positive places. So as you know,
Yeah.
representing PFLAG, like I'm saying, you know, I'm always very thankful for the libraries for being that for our youth. They run youth groups. And let's talk about outside of pandemic, but they run youth groups, and they're always very, very safe. And they will not put up with any sort of discrimination and stuff like that. So I do want to kind of call that out. I do want to call out for everybody on here as well that right here in Durham now we actually have care for trans people. We don't have to send everybody downtown. We actually have through CARIA Community Health in the Ajax facility. They have a wonderful team of four nurse practitioner doctors that are able to care for our trans Durham residents in a most fabulous way. They're all trained. They even have a space where they can work with your doctor. So if you have a doctor that's like, I don't know anything about it, but I want to help you, they have a team that will help your doctor so you can stay in place with your doctor. They run programs like with PFLAG. We do them together. One is Gender Journeys, which is like using 8 or 9 week sort of space where people can come and they get to talk about their gender, and they play games and they socialize and they meet people. Then there's the family transformation groups, which is again, it's an 8-week, which is just for caregivers and parents of anybody whose kid has told them that they're trans and they want to find out information. We have the doctor come on and tell us all about all the things that you're scared of, right? Then they run groups, Colors and Prism by themselves at CARIA. Then in PFLAG, we have tons of groups that are running in tons of space. And so I want to make sure that we still need more space. You are correct. I hear the youth saying we need to be able to figure it out. But I want to let you know that we have grown in Durham, right? PFLAG has grown. We also run a summer camp, right? Libraries have been involved in that notoriously in the past as well. We run Pride Prom. So those folks who aren't familiar, Pride Prom is, again, libraries come to this, DDSB comes, there's a whole bunch of organizations that come together for the community in order to access, and so they can go to Pride Prom. And it's a full prom. It's like dinner. It's like candy, and it's like dancing, and it's the most. And they can come as they are, who they are, how they want to dress, and it's this most beautiful thing. So I do say, getting yourself onto the libraries or getting yourself onto the PFLAG newsletter, so you get it emailed to you. It lists all these things. So it is a way for folks who are older who use the email system and that. I think we're working actually through some of our students right now to look for a Discord place. I think it's called a Discord server. The students can tell me because I don't know anything about Discord. So we're looking for a Discord server that we will, moderate so we can get information out to people who want it and a place where they're going to get it from. So I'm just kind of want to throw that out there to make sure that everybody knows that, like, yes, there are gaps, but there are the people that are out there advocating. And for sure, the libraries are a huge space. And we at PFLAG want to acknowledge that. And because just by them, they came to us, folks. They came to PFLAG and said, hey, what if we did this? That is Ailey. That is the most, I think, allyship that you can have is when someone comes forward and says to the community and says, what can we do? Right? So the libraries have been amazing. So I do want to say those thank yous. And just before I get to I want to have the panel say kind of like a closing remark. I want to recognize the fact that vulnerability for being here today, right? Because you took this chance to be here with us, to answer questions and put yourself out there. So Zach, is there anything you'd like to add, that you'd like to say that maybe you missed, or something you'd like to say to everybody, just about how you feel, and maybe some hope for other kids out there that are thinking about, wow, I think I could be trans?
I guess for any youth that be seeing this, don't be, it's such a common thing to say, but don't be scared, really. I guess there's really no, it's not worth it. You're a great person, and it's not worth fearing, like, maybe I'm trans. No, just don't be scared, okay? There's many people out there that will support you, even if your parents don't or your friends don't or anything. You can get better friends, you can get better friends. It's okay. And definitely just be careful, because there's definitely a lot of idiotic people there. And like I said, just don't be scared. You'll find somebody that will be there right beside you on your journey.
Nice. That is beautiful. Thank you. Own your journey and be you, no matter what anybody says. I think that's fabulous. Thank you very much for sharing that. Yeah, because oftentimes it can be scary. Al and Kathy, how about you? What about for you? What could you offer for, I don't know, hope for, and that light sort of out there for the community, or for, parents that maybe not understand, but, that supportive, hopeful place?
Ask questions,
Okay.
but come from a place of acceptance. Kids have it hard enough, especially during COVID. Oh my goodness. But teenagers have it hard enough just being teenagers. So be there for your child. Say, you know what? I don't get this. I don't understand it, but I'm willing to learn. Help me learn.
Great. Thank
What would
you.
you
That's
say?
really brilliant. Yeah. What about you, Al? You got anything to add to that?
No, not really. The only thing that really comes to mind with me is Lewis kind of is cautious who he talks to. There's his area of comfort, and then there's an area where he's not comfortable, where he'll be very quiet, won't talk too much, kind of looks to us to bring the support there so he can speak to people he's not familiar with, or in situations where he doesn't think he'll be accepted.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah.
very important for the parent to realize your kids are going to run into this.
Family
Yeah.
parties with cousins you haven't seen in 2 years. You
Yeah.
say, how are your
Yeah.
girls? And I'm like, I have one girl and one boy. I thought you had 2 daughters. I did. I have one girl and one boy now.
So being very
So
solid. I love that. I love what you're saying. Is I think what I'm hearing is that, you're saying, folks, that it could come. So for parents, it could come and be like, okay, it's a little bit of a surprise, but these are your children. You can love them. You can learn, and there's, no matter what, they're still your children. And I think that's a beautiful sort of space to be. That, like, we always don't understand everything, right? And that's a space that we always take up too. And when we're talking about that, we all don't know what we don't know till we know. And so that's the whole space, right? Is that, sometimes you get told stuff by your children, and then you can go and find out more, so you can choose to be on the right side. So Riley, What about you? What would you, I guess maybe like offer is like, and not so much like the hope, but giving some light to this space around for other trans folks out here in Durham. What would you like to offer them?
I mean, I don't want to be one to sugarcoat it, and it can be quite a hard journey, of course, but it's so worth it being your true self. Like, of course, it's freeing, especially if you're not in a safe place to come out. Of course, this is not me telling you to come out right now. Tell everyone. No, don't do that if that will put you in danger. But um really just being able to be your true self is very freeing, and it will help you whatever you're going through. It will help, of course, maybe not fix it instantly. Of course, it's a long process and journey, but honestly, to any trans person out there, you just need to be your true self and listen to what you want and what you need, and you don't need to take in anything else from other people and their opinions.
Great. Thank you very much. So I just want to say thank you. That was really great. I think what I'm hearing, folks, is like, you know what? You are who you are, and be who you are, and kind of like let the other people ride off of that. And if I can say anything, that I'm so proud of the panelists for being who they are, the love and the acceptance that they've shown their child, and for you to take this opportunity to come and share with us, because it's oftentimes we ride off the people's backs to get information. And so I offer anybody out there, please, if you're having someone in your life that needs support, reach out for the support you can get, and find community, whatever that looks like for you. And this is our time to continue to educate and bring forth the beauty, the strength, and the resilience of the trans community, and that they are just people, and they just want to live their lives and be respected. So thank you. And I'll pass it back to the library now to, I guess, Julia, to close us out.
Thank you so much to Jake for hosting us tonight. It's been a pleasure to work with PFLAG this week on the Sharpie activism event and again tonight. It's been wonderful. And thank you so much to our panelists, to Alan, Kathy, and Riley and Zachary, for sharing your stories with us this evening and for showing such courage, and for really sharing a message of hope this evening. So thank you also to Durham Libraries for helping to organize tonight's event and for your support. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening.
Thank you.